Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Matt Swain. Matt is a recognized customer communications industry thought leader. From delivering keynotes around the world to defining best practices, hundreds of well-known companies have relied on Matt's expertise and research for their current and future omnichannel communication initiatives. As Managing Director and Practice Lead for Broadridge Communications Consulting, Matt brings invaluable market research and consulting expertise to clients relative to benchmarking as well as for communication strategy, design, and execution across print and digital channels. Prior to joining Broadridge, Matt spent more than a decade at Keypoint Intelligence, InfoTrends, where he was a member of the senior management team with global responsibility for business development and customer communications advisory services. Matt is a graduate of Rochester Institute of Technology and holds a master's degree in print media. So without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Matt. Welcome, Matt.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
All right, Matt, we always like to give our guests the opportunity to share in their own words a little bit about their journey. So, we read your official bio, which, kind of sums it up in a very formal way. But we want to hear from you in your own words. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I was listening to that bio and I was thinking, I actually didn't realize you'd read the whole thing. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
As where you ended was that I hold a master's in print media, and that's a very specific degree, especially for a master's degree. And many of the people that went through that program were going back to run print operations. They might have had a family business or otherwise. And I was actually interested in print as one of the media channels that we now use to communicate. And so I did my master's thesis on the shifting spend of companies across different media. So print was a starting point for me, but I spend a lot of time now helping clients transition from print to digital communications and look specifically at how to create better experiences with the communications that they send.
All right. Now, in preparing for this interview, I was looking at the 4th annual CX and Communications survey that your company had done, where you studied 3,000 North American consumers, highlighting some of the major points and gaps in the customer experience 2 years into the pandemic. Could you tell us a little bit about the survey and some of the results that survey created?
Yeah, this was a passion project of mine when I first started it, which was in 2019, and I have a really strong marketing and support team that helps execute on it. And what's really been interesting watching the data over the last 4 years of conducting the research is there have been some notable shifts, specifically relative to customer experience. So, for instance, in 2019, we found that 35% of consumers thought that most of the companies they did business with needed to improve the experiences they provide. So let's say, roughly 1 in 3 had that position. In 2022, now that we've gone through we're well into a pandemic, depending on which way you look at it, we now find that 65% of consumers, so an increase of 30 percentage points, 65% of consumers think that most of the companies they do business with need to improve the experiences they provide. And that is quite a jarring shift from my perspective. And I think it speaks to the increased expectation that we as consumers have on the companies that we do business with, but also it shows a separation of the leaders from the rest of the pack when it comes to customer service and customer experience.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Very, very true. And so a big part of, we're all going through the pandemic, as you said. I guess it depends on how people want to look on it. But What are some of the most interesting research that you have seen or conducted in the customer experience space? And could you share with us also maybe what are some of the things that have surprised you the most in that research?
Yeah, I think the research covers customer experience, but then also goes into specifics around what consumers are looking for from the companies they do business with. So we found a lot of trending data around customer service, wanting um, better experiences when they needed that service experience, and at the same time, they're also asking for um, the use of technology, AI, chatbots, to be a first line of defense to answer easy questions. And I think that this is actually tripping a lot of companies up because there's technology out there that can reduce the cost to service a customer, but the challenge is that companies are becoming too reliant on the technology, and it's resulting in reduced customer satisfaction because they're not getting flipped to a live agent when they should be in that process. So a lot of the negative feedback that we see in the research is that people are looking for a sense of humanity or empathy, or let me speak to the operator, or make sure that I can understand the person that I speak to. And I think that component is so critical when you think about where somebody is in the journey when they need to contact you. There's usually some challenge in the communications that you've sent, or they're dealing with something very personal and they need to be serviced in a more personal way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really delicate balance. So we look at the impact from a customer service perspective of new technology being incorporated into that journey, but then we're also stepping back and saying, well, why did that person have to reach out in the first place? So again, through my lens, from a communication standpoint, it is, well, if you sent a bill or a statement to your customer, was it summarized? Was it easy to understand? Was it written in plain language? Did it have relevant content? Because ultimately, what we're hoping that we can help our clients get to is a very seamless experience, in that they send a communication, whether it's in print or digitally, and the recipient can quickly digest the information and understand what action they need to take: review my account, pay a bill, sign a waiver, whatever that next step is. That's what we're hoping that they're going to be able to do efficiently, and hopefully reduce that aspect of call center volume.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Now, in the survey that was done, you spoke about you focused on customer experience, omnichannel approach, personalization. Now, as it relates to personalization, the report says 65% of consumers would prefer to receive fewer, more tailored communication through their preferred channel. What has your research shown in terms of, do you still find companies all over the place, or are they more taking a more centralized approach? Because I do agree. I think it's really great if you could generally get everything in one place instead of, you're looking up information here, but that information that's located on that platform is not located on this
Right.
one. It's just like you're all over the place.
Well, so there's another aspect to that, which is, who are the 30-something% of people that don't want that, right? And from a personalization standpoint, actually specific to that, we do find people that want to remain somewhat anonymous digitally,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want companies to use their personal data in any other way than they should be using. And we actually asked a separate question around sharing of personal data, and we found so additional data that you as a company don't need, but would the consumer provide it to you if it enhanced their experience, created a better experience? And we found that about half of Gen Z and millennial respondents said that they would be willing to provide that, and that dropped off for a Gen X and baby boomer audience that was less willing to provide incremental information. But
Right.
Yanni, going back to your original question around centralization, I think we find one of the biggest challenges in a lot of our clients, especially our larger clients, is they've grown through acquisitions. They have different each line of business has its own underlying systems, and each head of the business might kind of operate their own fiefdom to some extent, which from a business owner perspective can be advantageous or easier, but from a consumer or investor or recipient perspective, that can be really painful because I'm having to log into different systems, or I don't have a total view of my relationship with that company in one centralized location. And I think that is an area that really needs to be addressed, but it comes back to the underlying systems, the people, the processes, and the technology supporting that ecosystem that need to be simplified and addressed before you can deliver on that better experience that the consumer is asking for.
Agreed. Sometimes I think organizations take simple and make it complex when it really should just be so easy. And I give you an example. I'm currently doing some market research for a client, and in the market research training that we did with the persons yesterday, we forgot to ask them if any of them were existing customers of that particular company. So I kind of just wanted to send out a quick Google form to capture that information, so we had it on file. And so we jump on Google Forms simply asking one question. And I literally spent probably about 15 minutes just trying to Google, how do you get multiple responses in a Google form? And there was no clear answer. Because, it has multiple choice, but then when we did the test and we clicked on it, we realized that the respondent would only be able to select one answer. And there may be cases where they are a customer of the company, but they're not a customer of all business lines. And so there are 3 business lines that we're doing the market research for, and we just wanted to find out if these persons were one customer of a business line or no customer at all, or multiple customers of a business line. And it took me so long to find it. And I said to myself, Google usually makes things so simple. Why in their form did I have to do so much digging to figure out that instead of selecting multiple choice, I should have selected checkbox, because checkbox acts like a multiple choice, but it allows you to select multiple responses or answers.
Right. Yeah.
And that came to mind a while ago just because of what you said, that I find that sometimes we think the technology is there to help us. It's not supposed to be rocket science. I'm not supposed to be trying to figure out, okay, where do I find this information? It should be there quick and easy, either in settings or as a drop down, so that you can know that that's an option that you can exercise and use. Would you not agree?
I would. And I think the irony there is part of ensuring that you've delivered on that better experience is doing that voice of customer, or that surveying, much like you would use the Google form to do the surveying of your audience, right? So we find that often where, again, through my lens, we'll work with a client and say, let's conduct some voice of customer research, and we use a platform where we'll enable a customer of theirs to go in and navigate their online account. And we'll say one of the common prompts is navigate to your most recent statement. And it's really interesting to watch people try to find that statement. And it's usually in a drop down, the 3rd or 4th drop down over, which isn't really that intuitive to know that a statement's going to be the eighth line on the drop down list. And it's one of those where, for those people that were building it, they know exactly where it is because that's how they built it and that's the approach they took. But for the consumer to navigate to it, that helps expose maybe an opportunity to improve or streamline that experience for consumers that are looking to get access to that document.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agree. I guess as you said, that's why it's important to test it, because then you get to see multiple approaches as to how different people will navigate on that platform. And if everybody is, in customer service, we have this example that we use, that we normally say, a school or a university, they basically wanted to see what the path was of the students as they were walking on the campus. And so they waited until it snowed, and then they kind of watched people's pattern to see where they walked. And that's what they use as a guide to make that the actual pathway. Because you might create a situation or a building where you've created a pathway for people to walk, but maybe that's not where they naturally gravitate to walk. And so if you look on it from an online perspective, if someone goes on a site, maybe because of how they're trained, because of other platforms that they've used, or just genuine human interaction or intuition, they may go, to the right of the page or to the top of the page thinking that's where they're going to find that particular item. But maybe that's not where it's supposed to be. And if you look at the pattern of how people operate, it would indicate to you if the structure that you're putting in place is really the best place to place that. Like, are people going to be able to find it easily? Is it going to be frustrating for them? Are they going to have to be reaching out to your support team to find out how to get that information? How easy is it for them to find this information? And it should be easy enough that I think a 5 or a 6-year-old should be able to find it.
Yeah. And I love the analogy with the snow on the surface. I immediately go to that visual that we've all seen where you see the trodden dirt path that cuts the corner of the concrete path or whatever it is, the cobblestone. But I also think there's also a component of this that when we think about what the company is trying to achieve, and then looking at what the experience is. So I use that statement navigation as an example. These are the same companies that are very aggressively asking their customer base to go paperless. So take the paper out of the process because it saves us money. We don't have to print and mail it. But then when you look at the value proposition for the consumer, it's not there, right? Like, what's in it for me to go paperless? Now I have to go to your website and navigate and try to find this, and the experience is no better. Usually it's a static, and I'm generically saying this, I know not all of our clients are this way, but it points you to a static document, not an interactive digital experience that provides more value than I would have gotten in paper.
Indeed.
And that was actually a really interesting takeaway from the research, which was 71% of consumers that had not gone paperless said that they would do so if the company provided a more engaging digital experience. And that's like the big aha, which is if we're creating better experiences, we're improving customer experience, but we're also achieving these operational goals of reducing print and mail and otherwise.
Amazing. So you said that consumers were looking for a more engaging digital experience. Could you share with us maybe 1 or 2 things that you think a company could employ or put in place to make their digital experience more engaging?
Yeah, so one of the weakest links of many companies' communication strategy, and again, I'm through my lens, right? So those that are sending a bill or a statement, is that bill ready or statement ready notification. So think of the banks, the insurance companies, the telecommunications companies, utilities that you work with. They'll send you that note that just says your statement's ready. Click here to view and access, right? And it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't look anything like the rest of the brand that they've invested heavily in. It's a monthly communication, so sometimes it's the most frequent touch point that I have with that company is this generic email. And one of the things that we do with clients is we there are 2 approaches. One is an enhanced email where we're able to deliver more content directly within the email. So instead of just saying it's ready, let me provide some value that directionally shows you how you did this month versus last, or things to think about, or other actions we're hoping you'll take. Or we can redirect you to a microsite. So instead of having to go back to the portal and log into the website that way, you can authenticate through the email and get the full details in a microsite or a personalized experience that's specific to that statement or bill that I'm asking you to look at.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on organizations that have, because digital is definitely, I know it's been accelerated, I would say 10 times since the pandemic, because organizations who weren't even fully digital or were looking to put digital as part of their strategy definitely had to do some quick acceleration because of the fact that, we're all stuck at home. And of course, this was the only way that they could ensure that there was some continuity of business with their clients. But let's say you use digital, I'm all for digital. I believe that it's really important. Technology is great. But I do also believe that you should make yourself accessible if I do need to speak to a live human being. And I find that sometimes the companies, they take on these technology tools, and when they take the technology tools on, and hopefully the technology should help you. So for example, let's say I wanted to reach out to my utility company, and they have this chatbot on their website, and the chatbot's name is, let's say, Ella. And I say, hi, Ella. And Ella is able to answer very standard questions. But of course, because I know Ella can't answer me, I'm going to say to Ella automatically, please connect me to a representative, so she can transfer the call to somebody, the conversation to somebody who can actually help me. But that in itself doesn't work very well, because nobody actually is able to be connected to. And then when you try to call them on the phone, you're not able to get through to them, because you're on hold for very long periods of time, 53 minutes, 60 odd minutes.
Yeah.
How do they, bridge that gap? Because people, I think, still want human interaction.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the challenge that I'm seeing now. It's coming through in the research that we're doing and some of the client discussions, which is the jump to embrace the technology from you could say it's customer experience led. Oftentimes it's cost cutting led, right? There's an operational savings to implementing that chatbot.
Right.
Hopefully that there is a balance, that there is the improved customer experience of getting something answered quickly. Like, where should I mail my bill to, or what are your hours of operation, or those types of things that somebody might get value out of the chatbot quickly. But your comment about that hold time, where you then go on the phone and you have to listen to a rotating 1 minute message that keeps telling you, go online, you can conduct everything there, yet that's where you started and you weren't able to achieve what you needed, so you came to the phone but you still have that hour wait. I think it does speak to the need to have the capability of flexing the staff. So you might have your full-time utility staff, and then you can tap into a third party that might charge you a bit of a premium, but they can help you during those surge times as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now, Matt, could you share with us, what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
I would say it is the voice of customer research tool that we use, and it is so efficient to be able to go in and get, I wouldn't call it real-time feedback. I mean, actually, I can do real-time if I set it up that way. But if I'm looking to vet a new concept, or go into a client meeting prepared with feedback from their customer base, so it's not just here's what we're hearing from generic surveys, but here's what some of your customers said about you. And I know that you know a lot of this already, but we just wanted to come prepared to the meeting. It's such a valuable tool in that way. So whether it's A/B testing, or a quick poll or survey, or getting feedback on a new concept or design, it can be a really valuable way of bringing data and analytics to the discussion with the client, or to make a more robust solution if we're building something on our own.
All right. Sounds awesome. Now, can you also share with us, what's the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about? Either something you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
So Broadridge is a pretty large company. We have 14,000 associates across 21 countries. We also support a lot of clients. So we actually send 7 billion communications a year on behalf of our clients. So that results in a little bit of practicing what you preach. So we have a client success team at Broadridge, and I'm a member of the client satisfaction and engagement work stream. And in that work stream, we're gathering perspective from our clients about what Broadridge does well, where we can be a better partner, how we should be thinking about our products, our services, our technology offerings going forward. And that's all in the hopes of best positioning ourselves as their partners of the future. Mm-hmm. So while we encourage our clients to do that voice of customer research to make sure that they're taking a design thinking approach and a customer first approach to the way that they support their clients, the end consumer in many cases, we're doing the same within our organization. I think it's incredibly important to always keep that in perspective, that you need to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening within your organization, the trends that are influencing outside forces, and then ultimately, how that can help better position you to be a better partner going forward.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Now, our listeners would have tapped into this episode and they're quite intrigued in a lot of what you've shared with us as it relates to communication strategy and your company, Broadridge, and, just even the report that we just were sharing some of the insights from. And they would like to connect with you online. They would like to reach out to you, probably even become one of your clients. How can they find you online?
Yeah, certainly. So from a company perspective, broadridge.com, as well as on LinkedIn and Twitter and other social channels. I also have a podcast called Reimagining Communications, because it's an area that I'm really passionate about, and there's a lot of content for anybody that liked today's content and the angle that I take, because I know it's slightly different than some of your other guests, Yannick. Mm-hmm. But that angle would be reiterated in the Reimagining Communications podcast, and you can of course reach out to me personally at Ask Matt Swain on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Amazing. All right. And I didn't know you had a podcast. That was mentioned in your when you were being promoted to me. So I will definitely be checking out your podcast, because I love to talk about communication. I think it's so important. So it would be good to hear some of the content that you have out there, and hopefully I can share it with some of my audience as well. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much for giving me a chance to connect with your base as well.
You're welcome. Now, Matt, before we wrap our conversation, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? If for any reason you get overwhelmed or challenged, and the quote kind of helps to get you back on track or just get you back refocused.
So it's funny, as you were asking the question, I had all these quotes, just going through my head. And the one that kept kind of pushing its way to the front was do no harm. And I think the do no harm approach is a really critical one, especially when you're thinking from with a customer service lens or a customer experience lens, that if you can live by a do no harm mantra, I think you're going to be in a good position.
All right. So do no harm. Love it. All right. Thank you so much, Matt, for taking time out of your busy day to hop on this podcast with us and share all of these great nuggets and insights. It was a great conversation, really, really stimulating. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I know our listeners will get great value from it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Just want to remind our listeners that you can follow us on Twitter at NavigatingCX, and feel free to join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.